Welcome, everyone, to Everyday Holiness, a Faith ND podcast brought to you by the Notre Dame Alumni Association. This is Dan Allen, Spirituality Program Director, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Audrey Barbe, a third-year exchange student from Lyon, France, and we're going to be talking to her today about her background and story, her coming to Notre Dame, and where she's headed to after this exchange year. So, welcome to the podcast, Audrey.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks.
Great. Well, thanks for taking some time with us today. So you're from France, but an exchange student here. Tell me a little bit about your background before you came to Notre Dame.
Yes, so before I came, I was studying a bunch of social sciences in my home university in France, located in Paris. And so I was doing, bachelors are very general in France, so I was doing like political science, economics, history, law, and it's a university that trains the political leaders of France, so those first years have like a kind of common knowledge background formation before we specialize with masters. So yeah, I've been studying that for 2 years, and for our third year we're required to go abroad, and so yes, when I found that Notre Dame was a partner university of my home university, I was really glad because it would be the chance for me to study theology, because I cannot do that in France. Universities don't offer that opportunity, and so yeah, I jumped on the opportunity, and it's been a blessing there so far.
That's great. It's interesting to me that you would be a young person from France and drawn to this aspect of theology at Notre Dame and the study of Christianity and Catholic thought. I think from an American context, sometimes we think about Europe as a place to be re-evangelized, or a place where there's increasing secularism. Of course, we have some of those struggles here in the United States as well. Tell us about your experience of growing up in France and what your development of faith was like during that time.
Mm-hmm. This question is interesting because Christianity has become very part of the tradition in France. It's the churches, the big churches, or for example, my parents got me baptized in France, so it's very much rooted in the tradition. But I'm not sure a lot of people still have faith, and I was born in a kind of family where my parents got married at church and got me baptized with my sisters, but we were definitely not a family that believed in God per se. And I think it's when I arrived in high school that I began to turn to faith. And especially I remember going on retreats with my high school, and I really loved those retreats because I could feel that, physically it was really good, like we would do some walks and some pilgrimages, and also intellectually, like I loved the preaching of the priests and how bright they were. And also spiritually, I could feel that the silence that was given to us was kind of nourishing. And so I was thinking that, there is something about this Christ that reveals what it means to be human and kind of extends my being in all these dimensions, which was really great, yeah. And so I think I grew in faith with my high school, and I did my confirmation when I was 15, I think. And then I went to university, and university was a bit of a hurdle because there aren't many Christians, and my university is very secular. So it was definitely a hurdle, but meeting a religious community helped me to grow in faith during those years.
And when you were looking at different options for where to study abroad, what was attractive to you about Notre Dame, I guess on paper or on the web as you were looking for options to come here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. At the end of my second year, I had the desire to become a sister. And so I was like, but I need to complete my bachelor before I begin to discern that question more intentionally. And so when I found out about Notre Dame and about the theology department, I thought that doing theology for a year would enable me some kind of discernment, like bringing faith closer to my daily life and daily considerations. Because in my home university, I really felt that like my intellectual life was like on one side and my faith life was on the other side, and there was no really connection between those two. And so, when I saw the good department of theology of Notre Dame, I was glad that this opportunity was presented to me in order to reconcile that a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, that faith seeking reason and faith and science not having to be opposed to one another, but can inform one another, that there's a limit sometimes to our scientific understanding, and then to go beyond that and try to understand things on a metaphysical level, we need the guidance of faith, and that's certainly something here at Notre Dame that's welcomed and part of the conversation. So in thinking of that, what has been your experience as you've come here? You had the concept of this would be a good place to come, but in actually coming here and studying, what has it been like for you?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, there are really great people here. I love the American culture. My dad also loves the US. He came here to study, and so when I'm came here, he was glad I would come. And it's true that the American people have a genuine openness to be willing to meet people and who they are, and I think they're very generous as well. I've met some really good people at the Basilica, and really very generous, like always offering me presents or things like this, and it's really, there's no reason for that, right? It's just genuine charity, and especially also among the students as well. I think Notre Dame students are very devout, and it's been making me grow in faith. And especially I converted I had a conversion when I was 15, so not so long ago. And when I converted, many of the teachings of the church was difficult for me to kind of embrace. And it took some time. And I think, especially with the Right to Life Club in Notre Dame, I think it's really deeply reconciled me with all the teachings of the church. And I went, for example, to the March for Life in Washington. It was really great. I mean, 2 years before 2 years ago, I would never think I would do that. But yeah, coming to Notre Dame, I discovered the joy of actually recognizing in the church what gives me life.
That's great. It's a really interesting aspect of your story that the Holy Spirit, I think, has been working through various people in your life to deepen your faith. Those of us who grew up what we might call cradle Catholics, where we were baptized as infants and grew up in practicing the faith in our family, that's sort of the regular way, you might say, of someone growing in their faith and then branching out from that. But it seems like your path was a little bit different in that you had this awakening in high school through some of your peers and some of the priests you mentioned, as well as coming here, the encounter with some of your fellow students, that's been an opportunity for you to grow in your faith, and you've been receptive to that. So can you reflect about that dynamic of your life, of other people who have helped you deepen your faith?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, in high school I was very much in a position of receiving the faith because all this was new to me. I was not raised Catholic, so all this was new to me. And when I came to university, I was blessed to find a religious community that is a Jesuit charismatic community in France. And so I met some brothers and sisters from that community that were kind of managing a kind of dorm, but outside of campus, because we have no dorm life in France. And so I met them through that because there were things relevant to faith happening there, like faith sharing groups and things like this. So I would go sometimes to see what would happen there. And when I first arrived in college, the first semester was hard because I fell again in some sinfulness, and so I ended up at Mass on a Sunday, bringing that to the Lord. I think I had the deepest experience of mercy there because there was this song from the lyrics of Saint Therese of Lisieux, which says, "If I had committed all the sins of the world, I would know that it's only a droplet of water in the ardent fire of God's mercy." And I think it was my deepest experience of God's mercy graciously given to me. And on that same Mass, I received the intuition to go on a retreat. And I think part of me remembered the retreats in high school. And so I did this retreat with this community, with this religious community. And there I took a commitment as a young adult of the community that had it's a commitment that had 5 pillars that were very simple, pray daily, going to some formations, spiritual formation given by the brothers and the sisters of the community. There was a bit of fellowship as well, once every 2 weeks with the other young people I was committed with. and then being part of the mission of the community, helping out a bit, and also being spiritually directed. And I think this really gave me a kind of spine in my faith and helped me introduce faith in my daily reality and daily life. So I was really blessed to find out a bit about this community, and yeah, it's also with them I think that I received the desire of my vocation from the Lord.
That's beautiful. Is this the same community that you're now considering entering into?
Oh no, that's not the same yet.
Okay, so tell us about that community that you're considering as a vocation and how you came to encounter them.
Yeah. So the first community has met has a big charism for the new evangelization, I think, because they have good communication, very turned toward young people, and it's true that they bring a lot of people back to the faith. I mean, I was brought back to the faith thanks to them. But as I was discerning this desire, I could feel that I was yearning for a place that would have somehow more silence and that would be more contemplative. And so I found out about another community when I was doing interreligious dialogue in the south of France. So yeah, and this monastic community in the south of France, they have a monastery that is close to a Muslim neighborhood. And so the nuns have a deep friendship with the people that live close to them. So I met them on that occasion. And I think when I went there, I didn't think particularly of my call, but I was struck by how they prayed, because when they pray with the gospel, so they read the gospel and then they sing the gospel, and then they repeat each verse of it 3 times. And it's a traditional monastic method of prayer. It's called manducation. And I was struck by this because of its efficacious dimension, that is, it really prints the spirit of the gospel in the heart and in the soul. So much that 1.5 years after, I was just praying, and I got reminded those words I had been repeating more than a year before in prayer. This time I was wondering where I would go to celebrate Easter. And so for me that was a nice intuition that maybe there was something going there that I should check up on. And so I returned to their place, to the community, but in a different monastery they have, and celebrated Easter with them. And it was really good, because at that time I was really struggling to have a sense of how to pursue holiness as a woman in the church, and also what femininity meant under the gaze of God, because I had the sense that the culture said many things, but I was really longing for finding the truth of femininity and the truth of what it means to be a woman through the gospel. And when I arrived there, really I found, I think, a concrete answer in the sisters that I met. They were really a great example of charity and of humility. And yes, what I like about their community, what I liked at the time I met them at Easter also, is that they are priests in their community and brothers, and they sing the liturgy of Easter together. And the combination of both of those voices was really, really beautiful. And so there was something in me that was restored in terms of the beauty of how humanity was created, I think.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of Basil Moreau's intentions for Holy Cross, of this relationship of priests, brothers, and sisters, and the way that we can inform each other. And we'll get to Holy Cross here in a minute, but I want to ask you a little bit. Well, first of all, what's the name of the community?
Oh, yes, I didn't say the name.
That's okay.
Yeah, they're the Little Sisters of the Lamb.
Okay, Little Sisters of the Lamb. And can you explain their charism and what's attractive about that?
Sure, yeah. So, maybe I'll begin with their motto, which is "Wounded, I will never cease to love." And I think it relates well to the mystery of the Lamb, right? That is wounded and that sheds his blood for us, for the redemption of souls. And yes, when I came back after this Easter I was talking about to meet them, this motto of the community that is core to their spirituality really, really struck me, and really, I think, healed some wounds I had from my childhood that I discovered I had through prayer. And the community was born in France at the time was when there was turmoil with regards to, like, it's the time where abortion was legalized and beginning also of drugs. And so the founders of the community during that time, she was a Dominican sister, and she saw a lot of her sisters leaving the convent she was living in, or from one day to the other, just removing their habit and wear normal clothes. And so, yeah, for her that was really hard to see. And during that time, she heard in her heart a call to live more poorly, just as Saint Dominic was living at the beginning of his life when he was an itinerant monk, preaching the gospel to whoever he would find. And so she had this in her heart, and so she told this desire to her prioress, to her superior sister. And the sister told her, "Oh, but what you have in your heart is beautiful, and you cannot live it with us. You have to have the courage to find something new, to found something new." So she went on a retreat, and the retreat was preached by a Franciscan brother. And it's during that retreat that the community was founded with the help of this priest. And when she talks about the foundation of the community, the sister, she says that it was founded during a night. She was in adoration, and she heard in her heart, "In his flesh he has killed hatred," as the incarnation of Christ, as the response to the spirit of turmoil the church was facing. And so yeah, that's a bit the historical part of it. But for me, when I heard about like this motto, "Wounded I will never cease to love," and this, "In his flesh he has killed hatred," for me it was a song of hope for my wounds, that they were actually not to be hidden or not to be despised, but actually that they could become the springboard to show deep love to those who are around me. So yeah, it was healing in that aspect. And also I think this motto provides a kind of a daily strength for going through each day, no matter what comes up, remembering that there is something deeper, to which we're trying to live up to.
Mm-hmm. In a sense that all of our sufferings, viewed through the lens of Christ's suffering, they're connected in that way, that Christ makes sense of our wounds, our sufferings in a way that wouldn't make sense otherwise because of his sacrifice on the cross. And I mentioned Holy Cross. As you talked about this community you're discerning and then came to Notre Dame, maybe speak a little bit about your encounter with Holy Cross and their spirituality and what that's been like for you.
Yeah, I think Holy Cross has a beautiful spirituality as well, to which I really relate, because I think their motto, "Hail the cross, our only hope," really resonates to "Wounded I will never cease to love," right? Yeah, it's funny with Holy Cross, because when I arrived, I found out about the names of the streets. Like, there was this Holy Cross Drive and this Notre Dame Avenue, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be well accompanied this year." At the crossroads of like Notre Dame and the Holy Cross.
Even in the names of the streets, the faith is present, right?
The faith is present, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's been a big blessing to have Holy Cross on campus, and also, I think the priests are really, really talented and really, really gifted in terms of a figure of friendship, in terms of their preaching on campus, and just in terms of their presence in the dorms. I think it's a really valuable resource. Yeah, and it's funny for me to learn about Holy Cross here, which was founded in France.
Right.
And I didn't know about it in France because, it's not from my region. I don't know, but and I can see that really when I get to speak about Holy Cross spirituality with American people, about Saint André Bessette or Basil Moreau or Edward Saren, it really brings me back to my French roots, and I actually discover a lot about French saints and the history of faith in France, being here in the U.S., which is really valuable to me.
That's beautiful. You talked about finding some friendship at the Basilica. What have been some of the sacred spots on campus that have been a source of grace for you?
Yeah, I think the Basilica has really been one of them. And it's funny because when I first entered in the Basilica, I was so shocked by the profusion of things in the Basilica. It was so overwhelming to me. And at first I really didn't like when I entered in the Basilica. It was just too much for me. Too much of detail, too much of gold, too much of Yeah, and especially it was summer, so the IC was super high, and then I would like put my hand in the holy water and it was warmed up, and I was like, oh, these American people they're crazy, like they put AC everywhere and then they warm the holy water, like what's going on? But yeah, as I came to daily mass at the Basilica, I don't know, it's as if my eye got attuned to the beauty that is there. And now I can say that really I enjoy the Basilica Mass, because there's something that I've lived there with the people that are there, with the paintings that are there, through which I received like sometimes dispositions of prayer or things like this. Yeah, and I go to the Mass in the morning, and what I really love is that there are a lot of retired people that go there, and they're a bit like a presence of maternity and fatherhood to me. Yeah, because I'm away from my family this year, and really friendships are really valuable with American people, with the other exchange students. But it's true that Basilica Mass is a special time for me because it gives me the opportunity to talk with figures of that would be their grandfather or grandmother. Yeah.
Right. Any other places on campus?
Oh yes, I think campus ministry has been the Coleman Morse building has been a really good resource to me, because I don't have that in France, and so coming here was really a big blessing to discover the diversity of clubs on campus in which you can grow in your faith. And I think it's really good that those kind of resources are provided here. And I've grown a lot, especially with the help of my brothers and sisters in Christ, and through the girl who is leading my Bible study, for example. And I would say also my dorm chapel has been a big place for me, because I'm playing piano for Sunday Mass there. And it's a big joy for me to feel part of the community, even though I'm only here for a year, even though I'm not American. But yeah, to be part of it, to be accepted in it as I am, and to receive this joy to serve the community.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and certainly a desire that we have for everyone who comes here to feel a part of this place and a sense of the universal church and the welcome that's there. I want to return to a little bit. You're talking about being a woman in the church and making sense of that, and what you saw in the sisters that was inspiring to you. So can you talk about that struggle?
Yes, so coming here, actually, I was looking for the way I presented my project to my home university is to do some research on women in the church and what it means to be a woman living up to one's faith, because I had to shape my project in a certain way that it would pass with my home university. Yes, I can say that this question can be very intellectual, and it's true that there can be some intellectual elaboration of femininity. But as for me, I got completely satisfied with this question when I received this concrete answer from the Lord, and when I received where He was calling me to next. Because I think we cannot think of femininity or masculinity apart from our call to holiness. And we think a lot about, especially with this the current state of the church, with the several scandals, what's the place of women in the church. And I think actually we can really be inspired by the life of the saints, and especially when I hear about being an empowered woman, as if the past has always oppressed women and that we were never free. But I think there are in the saints that had lived in the past really examples of women that have really influenced the church in the right track. And I think especially of Catherine of Siena, which is a foundational saint for the community I'm discerning with, and who really, at the time when a lot of masculine figures were schismatic, she was the one bringing conciliation and at the same time a purification of the church. And I think that's a feminine gift, to maintain that spirit of conciliation, but sticking to the truth as well. This is something I admire in Catherine of Siena. Yeah, such a rich spirituality as well. She was persecuted by her family when she was young. She was very religious and her family was not, and so I really relate to her in that aspect. And she had a cell in which she prayed, and her parents destroyed her cell. Wow. And when I discovered that, I was like, oh, but It's like my parents when sometimes I'm at home and they knock on the door, they enter my room and they find me praying and they're upset about it. And so they're like, we can never talk to you. And so when I read about Catherine of Siena, I was like, but like she has been going through this like before me, and I can look at her and like find in her a figure of inspiration. And yes, I think one of the female saints I would like to talk about is Saint Clare of Assisi. She's also one of the foundational saints of the Sisters of the Lamb, and I think I'm very inspired by her last words. She said, she pronounced before her death. She said, "May you be blessed, O Lord, you who created me." And I think discovering my femininity under the gaze of God brings me to a praise of God for what He has created me to be. And yes, relying on the saints and on the intercession of those saints is for me a more satisfying answer than what I would be able to achieve by solely my intellect.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I do want to talk a little bit about your family's response to all of this, what seems like a tremendous deepening of your faith, all the way to the point of discerning a religious vocation that I guess it wouldn't be a typical response to someone who grew up in the environment that you did. But as I said, the Holy Spirit often finds a way to those who are open to it. But it seems like it's been a cross for you to bear. So can you talk a little bit about what that's been like, of this simultaneous deepening of your faith and then the response of your family to that?
Yeah, that's a hard question because it's been hard overall. I mean, I think my biggest challenge coming here in Notre Dame has not so much been like adapting to the culture or going to my classes, but I think it's been dealing with my relationships with my family, because we find ourselves in very different places, having very different realities and different values and different interests. And the things that matters in our eyes in life are really, really not the same. And so, I can really feel that as I grew in faith, there was kind of a distanciation that would like naturally come in with my family, because at first I was just going to Mass on Sunday, so it didn't bother them that much. They were like, okay, if it's her thing, then she can do her thing.
Right.
But when it became more and more radical, I mean, I stopped studying monetary economics to come here to study theology, and nobody does that in France. So that's quite of a shock for my parents when they learned that I would study theology here, and they still disapprove it now. So that's hard. That's hard not having any affirmation in the eyes of my parents. But I think that when the Lord is calling to something, He resolutely calls, right? No matter what friends or relatives may think, although they can have a really, really good things to say sometimes and good advice to support. But I think as for my faith journey, there is something so attractive in pursuing the truth I read in the Gospel. That is not my family relatives that are gonna refrain me from doing that. And especially in the light of seeing the fruits of how much faith life brings in my life. Also, as we were speaking earlier with the Holy Cross spirituality, like in the cross, our only hope, I think it's when I'm the saddest with regards to those family ties. I mean, sometimes I call them and we're all crying. Like my sister speaks very harshly, my father is very cold, my mother cries, and like it's very chaotic. And it seems a huge chaos. But it's in those moments, like when I hang up the phone and I'm so sad, that actually I experience that my only source of life and my only source of joy is in the Lord. And so I remember a few weeks ago, I had these difficult conversations with my family, and I hanged up the phone and I was like, so desperate. And there was this club that organizes a meeting on Sunday afternoons at 4 p.m., which is the Militia Immaculata, and there was a talk that was given there. And that really gave me grace, so much grace, because it was talking about friendship and the Mass and how they restore us in communion with the Lord and with one another in a culture that leads us to feel often very isolated. And so her talk really spoke to my heart in the light of what had happened 20 minutes earlier. And I think this year has been kind of a succession of that, of harsh moments with my family, but that but as well like the resources on campus and the intimacy with the Lord and the friendships I have, really putting grace in those hard things.
I think we all have a desire to find friendship and support and relationship in the faith, that it's not something that we ever practice alone, that we're part of this community. But sometimes that comes from unexpected places or people that a year ago, for you would have been strangers, but all of a sudden through the intimacy of this shared faith, there's a real relationship there and a real sense of solace, of consolation, support.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned spiritual direction as you began to think more deeply about the faith. So what has been your experience with spiritual direction, and how has that practice been helpful to you as you've gone on in discernment?
Oh, yeah. I think it's really good to grow in, for me, it was really good to grow in awareness of the presence of the Lord in my life, and also to grow in holiness and in detachment from sin. Because when I converted, when I recognized Christ as the Savior of my life, like it's not instantly like all my being suddenly was oriented like 100% of my day towards the consideration of, I don't know, spiritual matters. Yeah, so it was, I don't know, at the beginning of the way, it was really a big blessing to be spiritually directed. And then as I grew with this first community, I met with this charismatic Jesuit community in France. I had a bad experience as well after with spiritual direction. And I think for me that was a sign from the Lord that he was not calling me in this community. Yeah, spiritual direction had like become a kind of cross. But I was like, okay, Lord, like I've committed as a young adult of this community, so I'll bear this cross with you, knowing that you are good and knowing that you're the source of joy. And also what I found, what I grew in with this experience is a sense of obedience. As when I'm part of the community, I'm called to obey in some kind of way. And this is something that sounds very radical for the world around, right? You obey, you're not free. But actually, yeah, it was part of like desiring to love my brothers and sisters in Christ, even when it's difficult. And so after my commitment was over, because it was a commitment of 2 years, I met this other community, and I had spiritual direction in this new community. And I can really say that the experience of fraternal life of the sisters is really a spiritual teaching for me. Yes, I remember, for example, during last winter break, I was telling this my spiritual director, the sister, about my difficulty with one of the sisters I was living with in the monastery during winter break. And yeah, she gave me a lot of good tips to cultivate charity. And she was telling me, a bunch of women living together in a convent, like it only works out through the grace of God. Like it's true that.
Sounds like a dorm on campus sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so, yeah, she was telling me, but really simple things of the gospel, like you pray for her every day and try to cultivate charity more intentionally. It's kind of Jesus telling, like, if you're good with the people you like, then what recompense is there? Like, be good to your enemies, right? So it's a bit a strong word, but actually, yeah, she really challenged me in pursuing holiness in the midst of the difficulties in the monastery. Yeah.
Well, it also harkens back. You talked about that experience of mercy as a young person. I believe you said in your first year of college.
Yeah.
Let's delve into that a little bit. That experience of mercy, that we share mercy because of what we have received, that we forgive because we've been forgiven. So what has been your experience of receiving as well as offering mercy to others?
Yeah, I think when I received this big experience of when I had this big experience of mercy from the Lord in my earliest years, I really see how wretched I was without the Lord. And so I think, yeah, I was really receptive to receive his love because I had really nothing I could achieve by my own. And at this time, I was very much in the hookup culture before I converted. And so when I discovered that there was deeper joy to be found in the gospel and to be found in intimacy with the Lord, it took a time to convert my whole being to what the gospel calls me to live up to. And so, yes, during those years, I remember that verse I received was, all her sins have been forgiven because she has shown great love. And so, for me, that was a good articulation of how when we receive mercy, it's also to share it towards the others and to have a gaze of love towards our relatives and towards our friends. And it really helps me not to judge the people I grow in faith with, and also my family, because my sisters are very much in that, and my parents really live in according to the manners of this world. And really sometimes it can be a challenge not to get pride out of my faith, because I can really see that they're going the wrong way. And so I think having had that experience of mercy is humbling. And when I remember it, when I make the effort of remembering it, it helps me definitely not to judge, because the Lord has a plan for each and every one of us, and for my parents and sisters included. And so He took time with me when I look back to make me grow in holiness, and I think He is going to take the same time or more time or less time with each of my relatives.
Well, and it's really important to understand the patience of the Lord's mercy, and as we've talked about a couple of times, the way that the Holy Spirit works, that in some ways the Holy Spirit was working through people other than your family to help with your own conversion back to Christ. And in some ways it seems like your life now is an example and a witness possibly to others, and so to be open to being used as that instrument, I think is a wonderful thing. Let's get into then this talk of holiness. We've talked about you've mentioned it a couple of times, this pursuit of holiness. What does that mean to you? What does that look like for you in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the first days I came here, I received a verse from the Gospel of Luke. It was Mary and Martha was like upset with all the serving. And Jesus responds to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing." And for me, it was really telling, because I was like thinking about all these things, like doing great in my schoolwork, doing great in my relationships with my friendships, maintaining good relations with my parents, and like going to church and pray sufficiently, and all this pressure that felt very weighty on me. And I received this verse, "But there is need of only one thing," as a true liberation that like lift a stone off my shoulders, that I had to be successful in all these things. And of course all these things matter, right, to holiness. But I think through this verse the Lord invited me to rest, to ponder His words as the first thing I need above everything else, and that everything else will unfold from this relationship with Him. And I could really have a sense that how sometimes I try to achieve holiness by my own, thinking, okay, I'm going to do it, I'm strong. But in fact, like, this verse came to challenge me, to humble me, and saying, no, but like, actually the first thing you have to do is quite simple, right? Is remember my word, so that it can infuse all what you do and all the interactions you have. And so, yes, I can say practically one thing the sisters taught me in order to keep His word is to mendicate, as I talked about earlier. And what I do is like I write on a little piece of paper from my morning prayer a verse of the gospel that touched my heart, and I put it in my pocket in order to be able to consult it from time to time during the day. And yes, I really experienced that this verse becomes the subtext of the day. Sometimes it sheds a light on an encounter or on the thing I have been doing, or I think also, I don't know, I like to think about this idea that to maintain our physical strength we eat, right? Or we sleep, we go to the dining hall, or we go to our bed, and usually it does the work. But what do I do to maintain, to nurture my soul during the day, right? Like I can have a very cloistered approach of prayer, right? Like now is the time of prayer, and now is the time of my day where I do everything I need to do. But I think the Lord has been challenging me in like, surely like valuing those times of intentional prayer, but He's been challenging me in letting this time of prayer infuse the disposition of my disposition during all the day, and yeah, in like making sure that everything I do it in communion with Him, and I doing for the sake of His glory.
That's tremendous. Yeah, it's clear to me that you have this disposition of openness of to receiving the grace that is coming to you at all these different phases in your life, which I think is tremendous, and it leaves us with a sense of, well, we're never done. We've never reached the mountaintop on this side of heaven, but it's always something where we're realizing more and more how much we need God through other people, through prayer, through all these experiences that will never be completely filled in this life. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it's true, and it's not something to be desperate about, that it's never ending, right? Because like the joy is only increasing since I converted, and of course like there are some periods sometimes of hurdle. But yeah, I've been lately like pondering with this winter, like I've been looking at the trees like in the spring and in the fall and in the summer they're very beautiful. They have leaves, they have flowers, and in the winter they have nothing. And for me, it was very telling for my spiritual life that there are also some cycles like this, and sometimes it's okay to not see the fruit of my prayer, or it's okay to feel very barren and to feel very, very useless, because the Lord may be working something in my heart, maybe deepening the roots, and actually that's a good thing as well. And so, yeah, but overall, I think growing with the Lord is an increasing of joy and of peace, and I think it's a big blessing.
Yeah, that's great. So, what does the future look like for you? Your plans after you finish here this semester, and obviously, we don't ever know exactly what God's plans have in store for us. But what does the future look like for you?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, I've just been accepted in religious life for next year.
Congratulations! Yeah.
Thank you. So I think I'll be in the place of formation of the Little Sisters of the Lamb. So they're a community founded in France, and they have one place in the U.S. in which I have been going a couple of times since I arrived here in August. But so next year I'll be in France, in the southwest of France, in this kind of retired place. Just as I think the Holy Cross men go to Colorado, right, for their novitiate to discern. Yeah, so I think I'll be in this retired place for a couple of years to see if that's what the Lord wants for me, and if this community is the land in which He wants me to grow.
Well, and I'm sure going to live in that place of contemplation will help you discern that vocation better to the sisters. What has been inspiring as you've seen this particular order of sisters pursue holiness in their own way?
I think one of the striking aspects of the community for me was that they're a mendicant order, which means that they beg bread. They go twice a week. They go out of their monastery to go on mission, they say, and they go to knock at the doors to ask food to the people. And actually, it's how Saint Dominic would preach the gospel as an itinerant monk. He would not teach people in a very condescending way, but actually he would situate himself kind of in this disposition of radical necessity, and ask people for food, and then that would spark a conversation and a relation in which he was rooted to give his witness. And so I think I see a lot of that in the sisters, and how much of a witness it is to the world, right? When you have some sisters that knock at your door, they have really good stories of mission to tell, that they have compiled in the book as well. And so in between the first time I came to see them and the second time I actually read that book, and for me that was a kind of that's what I want my life to look like. So yeah, that was a good indicator for me. And so yeah, I really like that aspect of the community. And also maybe one other thing I can talk about is their poverty, because they're a Dominican order, but also they were influenced by Franciscan spirituality, because the priest that helped for the foundation of the community was a Franciscan. And so when I go to their monastery, like, it's really hard. Like, we have shower with buckets of water, and like we sleep with no mattress, right? Like,
Wow.
that's pretty kind of like pulls apart from like the life the cool life I live on campus. And so yeah, coming there, it's hard. But actually, I experienced that each of these occasions where I lack the comfort I'm used to is actually an occasion to ask the grace of God. And so, for the first time of my life, when I went to the sisters, I found myself like praying before having a shower, because there was no other way to go, so that my shower
Lord, help me through this, right?
Yeah, and it's true. Like every office, they begin with like, as a monastic order, like, Lord, come to my assistance. And like, it's not something that they live just in the office, but that impregnates their whole daily life, because a lot of things come through the grace of God. They don't buy food. Like, there are only people who bring them food. And so for me, being there during the winter break was very telling, because like every 15 minutes, maybe there is somebody knocking at the door to either bring food, or sometimes they are sad, so they want to come to have a word of comfort from the sisters, or sometimes they come to help to clean the monastery or things like this. And I can really see how much their presence is a friendship to the people who live around the monastery. And especially because when they build a new monastery, they often build it in poor neighborhoods. So the neighborhood there in Kansas City is a neighborhood, with a lot of gangs, a lot of drug trafficking, and immigrants as well. And I can really see the brokenness of the exterior brokenness of the neighborhood they live in, but which is no other thing than the brokenness of each other, one of our hearts. And so they live in this really sharp awareness that what they see around them is only what is in their heart. And so I think that's a great way to ask the Lord His mercy to come, either for ourselves, but for the world around.
Yeah, it's this sense of if our interior disposition is not of God, then that plays out in our society, our world, and our relationships. But it seems like these sisters living in this area, it's not only the holiness that is there within, but all of a sudden they're having an influence positively and in a grace-filled way in the community where they're physically located, which is a tremendous gift. Well, Audrey, I just want to thank you for your time with us and with your Faith Indie audience. I can tell you that as people are listening to this, a lot of people are going to be praying for you in your future discernment and what you have next. And please pray for our Faith Indie family and for this audience, because it's in this friendship, as you talked about, in this relationship, that we help one another on the journey towards heaven. So just want to thank you for all that you've done for us.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, that concludes this episode of Everyday Holiness, a Faith Indie podcast. If you do not already receive our daily gospel reflection, we invite you to sign up at faith.nd.edu/signup. There, in addition to receiving the daily gospel reflection, you'll also receive notification of future episodes of this podcast. We thank you for listening, and we hope to have you with us next time.